The next speaker is Miss Elisabeth Keijzer. I would like to make her presenter. There we go. So, hello, Elisabeth. So, Elisabeth is a sustainability consultant who works in the Dutch Research Institute TNO, very famous. She has 10 years of experience in building and infrastructure projects both within the Netherlands and in European consortia. At the moment, she participates in the seeded project Pavements LCM, where she was responsible for development of guidelines and recommendations of sustainability data and tools. So welcome. I think we can hear you, is that correct?
I think so.
Yes, we can. And we are seeing your presentation, so the virtual floor is yours now.
Thank you very much. So I will try to tell you something about what we did in Pavement LCM, where we tried to develop main guidelines for national road authorities about sustainability assessment. And David already presented to you the framework and how to do sustainability assessment.
Elisabeth,
yes.
Sorry, I think we are having some issue with your audio. Maybe it's the microphone. It comes and goes. Can you just...
Does this work better for you?
Better. I think it's better, yeah.
Yes? Okay. Should I speak up a little bit?
It's good. It's good. You can go.
Right. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Restart. So I will present to you some of the work we did in Pavement LCM, where we tried to come up with guidelines for national road authorities on how to use sustainability assessment. And David already told you about methodology and the framework and how to do, for example, life cycle assessment. And I want to take you along to the practical side. So when you are doing LCA or when you are doing sustainability assessment, what are the main things you should do or should be aware of that you shouldn't do? So what we did is we already created standards and guidelines. And in work package 3, we focused on data and tools for sustainability assessment. And we looked into that by doing case studies and sensitivity analysis, for example, on the issue of uncertainty and durability. One of the first conclusions from this work package is that the most sustainable pavement component is not just a mixture with the lowest temperature or the highest amount of REP. And this might sound a little bit confusing, but I want to take you along in this discussion. Why is this the way it is? And then what I want to present to you is 12 recommendations for if you want to implement sustainability, what should you think of? So the first one is always compare sustainability on a long-term perspective. Always compare pavement solutions in a project context with a long-term, for example, at least 40 years perspective, and never just on a mass basis, comparing 1 ton of product X with 1 ton of product Y. And why is this? Because innovations only lead to real improvements in sustainability when you are changing the whole system. So if you're considering them on a systemic level. For example, you can have one product which has a very low temperature in its production, but it will have a shorter lifetime than another mixture. Or a pavement component might have specific circumstances where it is working very well or very badly. For example, high intensity traffic or lots of very cool temperatures or variations in the climate. It's not just one solution which will always be the best, but if you compare on a longer term perspective, you will get insight in what's better or what works and what doesn't. So please never compare 1 ton to 1 ton. And the other thing which is connected to this is number 2, always be aware of trade-offs between certain characteristics. So if you do this systemic analysis over a longer period of time, it will reveal also some trade-offs over that time period. For example, when you're using a lot of REP in your asphalt mixture, you will need some additives. But sometimes adding a lot of additives will have negative effects on the environmental performance of that simple mixture. Or having a mixture with a high amount of REP might have influence on its technical prestation. I don't say it's bad, but just you have to make this whole systemic comparison and see what happens when you change one parameter and how it affects others. And third, if you want to start with sustainability, please define first what indicators you find important and what is your goal. Because what we very often see is that sustainability is an umbrella concept. And so many indicators can be investigated. You can look at CO2, you can look at biodiversity, ecosystems, toxicity, acidification, pollution of the air, at the local scale, at the global scale, circular economy. There are so many things you could look into, but there's not just one solution which will tick all your boxes and will score best on every indicator which you can think of. And it will make your work very complex if you look at a lot of indicators. So our third recommendation would be choose a limited amount of indicators. For example, if you're just starting, look at CO2, resources, and costs, and then work out your plan on how you're going to deal with it. Set targets. Try to look into how can we achieve these targets. How can we achieve lower carbon footprint, less resources, lower costs on all a combination of those indicators. And of course, I already mentioned it, if you have multiple indicators, you will automatically get the question, how will you combine those? Because you can very easily say, I find those three indicators equally important. So you can do a distance to target measurement. If my target is a certain amount of CO2, a certain amount of resources, and a certain cost level, you can just put three pillars next to each other and you can see how good they all perform. But what you're then implicitly saying is that you find all those indicators equally important. Those goals are equally important for you. What you could also do is use a weighing system to aggregate multiple indicators into a single score. And that's what we do in the Netherlands, where we are using the 11 impact categories and in the future the 19 impact categories of our determination method, which is linked to the European standard 15804. So we include a lot of environmental indicators and we use them as a single score by weighing them with environmental prices. And there are lots of things to say about weighing systems, because generally you can complain that weighing is always a matter of subjectivity, if it's either economic or based on expert judgment. It also always creates a certain uncertainty in your results. But think of it, that's the most important thing I want to mention. If you have multiple indicators, decide on beforehand how you are going to use them, and not once you have implemented them and you already have your tenders with sustainability in it, for example. And then, once you have defined your goal, you start with that. Then choose an appropriate tool and only tolerate data results which are generated by this tool. Well, why do I say that? There are many tools available, but using different tools, databases, and their methodologies will for sure lead to different conclusions. It is very annoying to hear and very annoying to work with as well. But there are so many tools available. Each of them has very specific characteristics. So when you start, choose a tool which suits your needs, for example, in terms of indicators. If you want to have CO2, it should have the indicator CO2 in it, of course. Choose a certain impact assessment method and one database, and just accept only that one. To help you, we created a sustainability compass within the Setter project, Pavement LCM, and it helps you to find a certain tool. So it helps you to select certain preferences which you have, for example, the language, in which phase you want to use it, what kind of results it presents, and then it helps you to find out which tools you could use. The seventh, we strongly recommend any consideration of European harmonization of data. And of course, it's always a question to harmonize or not to harmonize, because on the one hand, it's quite an effort to harmonize, and it might conflict with individual targets or activities. As I mentioned, in the Netherlands, we have 11 indicators. If we would harmonize on the European level, we might get the discussion, does everybody want to use those 11, or do we have to forget about them? That's, of course, very difficult to decide on together. But on the other hand, it has a huge benefit. If we could harmonize our methodologies and our data on the European level, we could create a big data stock. And then all countries could use the same data sources, the same EPDs of products, and we could really speed up sustainability implementation. But how to harmonize is, of course, quite a complex question. In the Pavement LCM project in Work Package 5, we developed a roadmap for harmonization, which describes which phases or which steps would you have to take if you want to come to a European system. Additionally to that, there's a new research coming up, I presume. There's a new set of research call for 2023, which also addresses this issue. So for sure, this discussion will be continued in some way. And to what level of detail you can always discuss about, but just the fact that effort is needed on this field, I wanted to mention that. Well, this is a bit one coming in between. It's about green procurement, what Rob already told about. We really wanted to emphasize that if you're going to do green procurement, please set clear boundary conditions when you're starting such a system. Because it's not just about tool selection. If you're going to implement sustainability, you have a complete system to think about. For example, who are you going to ask to deliver the data? Who is responsible for the sanity check on the data? Is there a system of an organization who is independent and involved, who is going to manage the whole data system? All those questions, if you don't address them upfront, you're just creating a chaos, and you don't want that. What could also help in this process was development of more detailed guidelines on how to do LCAs of asphalt, so to say the PCR. And of course, we already do have a PCR. There is a European PCR, which describes the A1 to A3, the production phase for LCA of asphalt. But as Rob already also described, in the Netherlands, we are really far in the detail of how those LCAs should be done. And we find out that it really helps to have this detailed information, because it makes it way better to compare the data or the results of several EPDs. And also there's a more equal level playing field of all parties involved. So the whole system becomes more robust, more reliable, and more comprehensible. And that's the way to really achieve this true sustainability. And this one is already something I mentioned slightly before. I wanted to emphasize it once again. If you are mixing the results from tools and databases, please never do this. I already mentioned that there are many tools, and different tools lead to different outcomes. Well, I want to show it with just one picture. It's a comparison of climate change impacts of several construction phases, calculated with five tools for a certain asphalt mixture. And it doesn't matter so much which asphalt mixture it is exactly, or what the stages mean. But what I want to show to you is that for each bar, you see differences in the order of the results. Not only the height of the bars is very different for each tool, so each tool gives a different outcome for the same life cycle phase, which is strange. The other thing is also that it's not always the same tool who is the best, or the second best, or the third best. You see the bars varying in order all the time. So if you want to keep monitoring or measuring sustainability, you have to use one tool and stick to that tool, or one database and stick to that database. We're almost at the end of the presentation. And as I mentioned at the beginning, in this Pavement LCM project in Work Package 3, we also added uncertainty analysis. And uncertainty is something which is a statistical term. And statistics can be extremely complex, because if you take into account all the data which is in a life cycle assessment and all the parts where you could have done an assumption or where you do have certain uncertainty in the background data, if you take into account all that uncertainty, it becomes a hugely statistically complex puzzle. But we also found out that uncertainty can have strong influence on the results. So our recommendation would be to always implement at least a basic form of uncertainty analysis either when you ask for an LCA or when you are conducting an LCA yourself. Well, to make it a little bit easier, how can you do uncertainty analysis? The most basic form to do that is to investigate first what are the most impactful processes, dive into those processes, check if they're really correct, or whether mistakes might be taken there, or whether assumptions might be playing a large role. And secondly, look at the processes with large standard deviations. You don't need complex statistical software to do these kind of checks, but it will greatly improve the reliability of the results. Another thing is that sensitivity analysis can be a really useful tool to identify the phases which contribute the most to the overall uncertainties. So sensitivity analysis is something which every researcher would like to do, but which we not always do because of lack of time or lack of priority. But sensitivity analysis are really crucial to add if you want to know more about uncertainty, and thus on the reliability of your results. Well, and then I want to move on to the last recommendation, which is the highest uncertainty maybe. And maybe you already guessed this one. It's durability. And what we want to recommend is to be extremely careful with durability claims. Why? Durability highly influences results. I always say that if the environmental impact of an asphalt mixture is like 10 points over a period of 10 years, if you prolongate the lifetime with 1 year, you already have a 10% gain in your sustainability claim. So sometimes you're really uncertain about lifetimes, so we just presume it's something. Or if we have lifetime prolongating measures, we just presume that they prolongate the lifetime of a pavement with 2 or 3 or 5 years. Please be aware that either choosing this 2 or 3 or 5 can have a huge impact on your total sustainability goals. And just because it has such a big impact, I would really recommend to do something with it. So don't ignore it because it's difficult. But if you can do something on durability, you can achieve also a very long-term effect. So what we would like to suggest to you is that if durability is a topic in your sustainability or in a project, please make sure that uncertainties are addressed. Please make sure that claims, if they are made, are well argued with preferably also some evidence, for example, laboratory tests or information from abroad. And 3, please be sure that conservative approaches are used. And what do I mean with conservative approaches? I already said if you have lifetime prolongating measures, so preservative maintenance, for example, and you don't know if it's 2, 3, or 5 years, please use the 2 or 3 and don't go for the 5 directly. It will not look perfect on your sustainability goals, but it will also make sure that you don't make claims which you cannot realize. And then what? I tried to give you 12 recommendations, but it's quite a lot. But there's also a sort of bottom line in everything. Our overall conclusion is that critical judgment is crucial to make sustainability happen, to make it real. And you don't have to be a sustainability expert, but just always consider first, what do you want to achieve as an organization? You don't have to think big. You can just start small and start building it out. And the second one, which we always often overlook, is, okay, if we want to achieve this, how are we going to organize this? How can we make it happen for everybody, every party involved? For example, as Rob just mentioned, we're not going to ask data from people who cannot deliver it. How can you make it happen? And the last thing I wanted to mention is durability. Just once again, all of us and when I say all, I mean NRAs, companies, sustainability researchers, and statisticians, we all need to contribute to this topic because it can really make or break sustainability of our pavements. And it's a very uncertain business, but we need to get grip on it and make it specific for all the projects we are doing. Thank you. That was my presentation.
Well, thank you, Elisabeth. Really, really concise and straight to the point. Thanks for all these tips that I think will be very useful for people who are approaching sustainability assessment at the early stages. There are a couple of questions for you, Elisabeth, but they are basically on the same topic. So I'll summarize the two questions in one.
Go ahead.
From Anna and Konstantinos, and they're about the weights. So the weighting process that happens in the Netherlands to arrive to a decision making that I guess with a multi-criteria. So the question is how you select these weightings, the weights, do they come from some software, from case studies, or is an exercise that you've done in workshop, for instance, at national level?
Well, I could be a little bit more specific. Actually, there are two types of weights. And I think you're referring to the weight of multiple indicators and how to get them to a single score.
Yes.
And that is determined by scientists. So there's a research company who is developing those weighing factors. And there's lots of also involvement of stakeholders in that discussion on what should be the correct weighing factors. And once this research is established, the weighing factors are included in a national determination method for LCAs.
Okay, I guess that's clear to me, and I guess Anna Konstantinos can reply there. Just another question is a comment from Joseph Shakat that says, great presentation. That's it. And
Okay.
I do agree with that. And I think we're a little bit behind. So Elisabeth, thank you so much. I don't know if Brescia has some question for you. I'll leave it the stage.
No,
You're welcome.
thank you very much, Elisabeth. My only comment is that I can't agree more with Joseph. It's been a great presentation and very useful, these 12 tips. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If there are other questions, then my contact details are there. I'm happy to help.
Thank you.
Elisabeth.